Good evening, everybody. Thank you all very much for coming. Before the main attraction, I just want to invite Matan Peled, the CEO of Im Tirtzu, just to say a few words. Everybody, please be quiet, turn your phones on quiet, and enjoy.
אפשר לסגור את המוזיקה? ערב טוב לכולם. ערב טוב לכולם. So to honor our guests, I will speak in English from now for my 2 minutes. Thank you very much for all the good guys from Turning Point USA. God bless you. All the people from Im Tirtzu, all the volunteers, all the people here really appreciate what you're doing in the States. You're doing amazing work. Thank you very much, Charlie. So basically, the title of today, the one that we are going to talk about, is Common Threats and Mutual Threats. In my opinion, and I think the people from Turning Point USA will agree, there are two big enemies: ignorance and taking things for granted. When you're ignorant and you don't know history and you don't know your surrounding, then you are weak. And then the bad guys can come and swallow you. And when you take things for granted, then you say, everything is okay, I don't appreciate my life, I don't appreciate my society. Then it also makes you very weak and the bad guys can come and take you. So I think this is enough. Yesterday, I took Charlie and his guys to Hebron. I think it was, for me, it was an amazing experience. I felt a lot of love for Israel and wanting to know and want to understand more. So it was really good, and I thank you for that. So because you came with me and us to Hebron, so now I want to give you a present before you start. Im Tirtzu shirt.
Love it.
So don't worry, the other guys of Turning Point USA, we have shirts also for you.
I love it.
You can put it there.
Muscle shirts, right?
There are more. So Charlie, please, the stage is yours.
Oh, thank you, Matan. Thank you, brother.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matan. First of all, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. I just want to first say thank you to the wonderful organization, Im Tirtzu. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation. I'm going to do that all evening, so I apologize for my horrible American English accent. I was very pro-Israel before this trip, but I'm just on fire to continue to advocate for this moral and godly country, seriously. And I'll kind of walk you through the last 48 hours. It was a real eye-opening experience for me. You know, we're going to Hebron yesterday, and I asked Matan, it's safe, right? Of course it's safe. Oh, great, it's okay. So I shouldn't wear this around the streets there. But the Western media has become so good at lying about this country. And again, I'm very, very pro-Israel. I'm an evangelical Christian. I'm a conservative. I'm a Trump supporter. I'm a Republican. All the good things. For my whole life, I have defended Israel. But even with that, I was programmed by the Western media to have certain lies programmed into my head. So for example, we were on the hill yesterday in Hebron, and I asked, where are the tents? No, seriously. I said, where are all the refugee camps? I've been told my entire life that this city is a refugee city. And everyone laughs. There's malls, there's shopping centers, it's 97% Arab. And it was so eye-opening to actually see it firsthand, because I went in thinking it was going to be an actual refugee camp. And someone made a very good point, which is, how can you be refugees for 70 years? By definition, you're not a refugee after 2 generations. You're not fleeing anything. So anyway, that's besides the point. And it was amazing to me how, and I knew this, but it was reaffirmation how difficult the IDF has it. And I've never encountered people with such self-restraint. I mean, we had these horrible people from Breaking the Silence, is that what they're called? That get right up in the faces of the IDF soldiers. And these IDF, they're doing God's work. I really believe that. And they have such unbelievable self-restraint. And they have these maniacs with these cameras right in their face, trying to provoke them, trying to profile them. And I think to myself, if they only knew the self-restraint, if they only knew the moral conduct that the IDF operates with every day versus the terrorists of Hamas and Hezbollah. I mean, and anyone who dares make a moral equivalency between the conduct and the behavior of the IDF and Israel, which is a moral superiority. What the Western media tries to do is they try to make it some sort of equal playing field in the conversation. That Hamas and the IDF, they're somehow both on the same playing field. No, no, no. The IDF is righteously and correctly defending the nation state of Israel, God's chosen people in the Holy Land. And the self-restraint that they go through is unbelievable. And I saw it firsthand that these maniacs were going up. That's really what they are. I mean, they have nothing better to do. They remind me of some of the protesters I deal with on college campuses in the States. We'll talk about it because there's a similarity there. And there's a kind of a warning that I want to give you because I see what's happening here. And these are just 18, 19, and 20-year-old total, we have a word for it in the States, and I don't know if it applies here, it probably does. We call them patriots. They love their country. They believe in the value system. They enlisted, obviously, through mandatory service. And what's the thanks they get? They get cameras right in their face trying to expose them because they're fighting for what is correct and what is right. So that was an eye-opening experience. And then today, we had an amazing opportunity. We flew in a helicopter all the way up to the Golan Heights, which, I mean, I'm going to, for the rest of my life, and hopefully in this presidential term, advocate for the international community to recognize the Golan Heights as a true part of Israel. Because it is unbelievable to me that people, you know, and this is very important to remember that, you know, Syria will never be okay with getting that territory taken away to them, especially to Israel. And it's going to take unequivocal strength and relentlessness on behalf of Israel to make sure that that does not fall back into the hands of Syria or Hezbollah or whatever organization takes that over. And, you know, I learned today, the 2,000-year-old, you know, synagogue remains were found there in the Golan Heights region. And, you know, something that I'm going to use really in my advocacy in the States and the media that I do is, how could anyone be occupying their own land? Can anyone explain that to me? Because the Jews have been living in this land for thousands and thousands of years. And again, I always knew this, I always believed this, but you know, this amazing organization and Matan and your entire team did an unbelievable job of showing that to me. It really did. And so I saw it firsthand in the Golan Heights, and I couldn't believe it. I said, what do you mean? This is not Israel. Well, they said it's Israel. It's not Israel. It's very complicated. You know how the explanation goes. Whereas, what do the Arabs say? No, it's ours. It's like very direct, where the Israelis, you know, back and forth. It's sort of ours. It's sort of not. No, it's yours, 100%. And then we flew down and we saw the barrier to the Gaza Strip, which was very eye-opening to me as well. And one of the biggest mistakes that Israel has made is getting out of the Gaza Strip. And seeing what has happened, it's become a terrorist jacuzzi, essentially is what it has become. It has become a terrorist jacuzzi where they are now closer than ever to fire rockets into Tel Aviv, which you see recently they're willing to do. They build terror tunnels instead of schools and hospitals. And I asked the numbers. I mean, Gaza is a small place, and they're getting billions of dollars a year. And where does that billions go? It doesn't go for schools. It doesn't go for hospitals. But it goes to build terror tunnels. It goes for missiles. It goes for rockets. And we'll get into a second of exactly who's funding this and who's behind it. We all know that. I would like to hope one day that Egypt could clean up that problem. We'll see. I'm not exactly sure they want that problem, to be perfectly honest. But it was a big mistake, and there were thousands of Jews that were living there. And here's the thing, is that the narrative war is being lost in the United States, my friends, just so you know. Because I had never heard the argument that Jews were pushed out of their own houses in Gaza. You know, we always hear that refugees. That's 5,000 Jewish refugees out of Gaza, right? 10,000, I stand corrected. 10,000 out of Gaza. That's unbelievable. That they had identity in the region, identity in their homes, and they were pushed out of there. So that, again, that was just really amazing to me. And then flying, where it all kind of came together was when I was asking, you know, our wonderful helicopter pilot, who is a hero from the first Lebanon War, amazing guy, and he was walking me through all the different zones. And I said, when will it be enough for the Arabs? Like, when will it be enough? And he said it very simply. He said, when all the Jews are dead. And it hit me. It said, if you do a thought exercise, a hypothetical, which is if the IDF took 10 days off, what would happen? Israel would be gone, and the Jews would be, you know, become persecuted again. If all the Arab nations took 10 days off, no armaments, everything would remain the same. Everything. Which side is moral and which side is immoral? If Israel dared lay down their arms, this country would be under unbelievable barrage of missiles and armament. And yet, if the Arabs did, you guys, we have our land, let us keep our land, and we want peace. Only one side wants peace in this conflict. And I've heard that before. It's not like I'd never heard it, but it's very, very obvious now. And it's too bad, because I actually believe that some of the Arabs living in Gaza want some form of peace. I don't think they want Hamas anymore. I think that there's more discomfort underneath there than ever before. I think that Abbas's time is coming to an end, and thank God that President Trump is finally putting a lot of that funding in jeopardy from the West, which is phenomenal. And you know, I'm a huge fan of economics, and when you pay for something, you usually get more of it. And I didn't know up until a couple months ago that my very good friend Sander Gerber from the United States, who was advocating for the end for the pay-for-slay legislation, which essentially was money that the Palestinian Authority would give the families of terrorists that kill Jews. So when you pay for something, you get more of something. So if you're a poor family in the West Bank, and you know you see your wife struggling and your kids, like, oh, you know, I'll go kill a couple Jews. They get whatever reward they think they're going to get in the afterlife. But also, your family gets a short-term monetary award. In fact, I think it lives in perpetuity for other generations. I could be mistaken there. And thank goodness that's finally being put into question. It's so unbelievable to me, what's happening in the States, and I'll walk through it kind of. There's some positives. Finally, there's a president who moved the embassy to Jerusalem, which is long, long overdue. So we thank the president for doing that. Canceled the Iran deal, which would have, honestly, you want to talk about, this is so, the worst part of the entire Iran deal was the sanction relief, because that would have given them the cash. If you think Hamas has money now, wait till the sanctions are lifted on Iran, and that money just starts flowing to these terrorist organizations. Right now, Iran is really being squeezed, and they have to kind of say, well, maybe we don't have as much money to send armaments over there, to send cash, you know, to these terrorists. And the president canceling the Iran deal, and it was totally courageous. It was in total defiance of the entire international community. And you start to see a commonality here, that when Europe is becoming increasingly anti-Semitic, you saw a recent parade in Brussels with horrible anti-Semitic imagery. You see in the United Kingdom, which I have some wonderful friends here from the UK, you have the head of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, who I call Jew-hating Jeremy, who is he's a horrible person. And on Holocaust Remembrance Day, he lays a wreath at the feet of the Munich, the individual who killed, the Munich terrorist who killed the Israeli wrestling team. That's who he lays a wreath for on Holocaust Remembrance Day. This guy believes Hamas is a democratically elected government. He thinks sanctions should be lifted. This is who's leading the Labour government, the Labour Party in the United Kingdom. And then, unfortunately, you know, my own beloved country, America, and I'm actually in my second favorite country right now. But my favorite country, of course, being the United States. I'm so disgusted by the rise, and this is very important for everyone in this room to realize, and it's not being exaggerated by the media. There is real institutional anti-Semitism rising within the Democrat Party. Not just rising, it seems to really being revealed. And the president is doing the right thing by highlighting this. You have Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who at the very best, she's a serious problem. And she has said some very questionable things. If at best, that's probably giving her more credit, is saying questionable. And she goes completely unchecked by the Democrat Party. And you have my fellow 20-something, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who we can get into her in a little bit, by the way. That would be far too much fun. Who says, in the brilliant stroke of historical and geographic genius, that somehow Palestine is occupying Israel. And then a reporter says, what do you mean by that? Oh, you know, like it's kind of they're on top of each other. That was really convoluted. But it's really sad because it seems as if, you know, the Jews are such beautiful people. They really are. And as an evangelical Christian, I have such respect for the tradition, for the culture, for the family values, for the reverence of the Jewish people. And the more time I spend around, you know, Jews, really they want a place to be able to worship, access to the holy sites, and the ability to live their life. And it seems as if the entire international community wants to put that into jeopardy. And what I find so promising about Israel is the willingness to fight for what you hold dear. And that is a moral and righteous fight, make no mistake. To fight for your history, to fight for your land. And you are on the right side of history when you do that, make no mistake. So we have a lot of common threats. I talked about Iran. Iran is the piggy bank of Hamas in the region. And I'm a huge critic of Iran. And they're doing everything they can to destabilize Israel and destabilize the region. For those of you that follow my commentary closely, I'm also a big critic sometimes of American foreign policy in the last 20 years. A decision that harmed Israel and a decision that harmed America was the foolish invasion of Iraq. It was absolutely absurd, and we should not be afraid, any Americans in the room, be afraid to criticize this decision. I'll walk you through it. 9/11 happened. I remember where I was in first grade, and it was such a horrendous, I know, first grade, right? But I remember where I was because one of those things, it was almost our generation's Pearl Harbor. It was such a sad day. 3,000 Americans lost their lives. And I remember 3 years later, when we're declaring war on Iraq, I remember asking my teacher or my parents, well, all the hijackers, they were Iraqi, right? And they said, well, no, most of them were Saudi Arabian. I said, well, then what are we doing? Like, why are we invading Iraq? I don't get it. And of course, we supported it. We wanted to support the troops. What ended up happening is America spent well over $1 trillion in this region, lost thousands of lives. And honestly, Saddam, horrible guy, no doubt, but he used to fight Iran. He used to launch missiles in Iran. He used to keep Iran very busy and in check. And now it seems as if it's unobstructed. Iran has more resources and more focus to be able to focus on Israel. And it always, really bothered me that we made that decision, and America, I think, destabilized the region. Of course, then they're led to ISIS. But kind of as a tangent of that, and something that I think it's important to point out that in the region, all of you realize one of the other big exporters of terrorism is Saudi Arabia, and we have to be very honest that I know there's increasing dialogue, and that's fine, but they're the #1 exporter of Wahhabism, which is the most extreme form of Islam. They're building madrasas all over the world that teach rampant anti-Jewish, anti-Semitism, and anti-Americanism. My country lost 3,000 people at the feet of Saudi Arabia. So be very careful. Be very, very careful because they hate Jews too. And I don't want to see what happens where there's a bait and switch here. But I think that with Israel, there's very few friends in this region. And I think you all know that. And being from America, we of course suffered under bad decisions of the past, and we saw it under in recent administrations how this region has become increasingly more complicated. And so I speak a lot about the Iranian threat. I speak a lot about the Turkish threat, which is of course growing here very quickly. And you guys are the only democracy in the Middle East. You guys are the only beacon of freedom in a region, in a sea of tyranny. It's the best place to have, for LGBT, for all rights, for free enterprise, you name it. And you guys get the most amount of hatred, the most amount of missiles, and the most amount of vitriol. And so we do share some very, very common threats. But there's also another threat that we share that I want to talk to you about, which is the threat of the left. And this is very important to realize. Very important, the left is growing in Israel. It's not growing as fast as it is in America. But the left wants to destroy everything from within. They want to infiltrate core institutions, and they want to destabilize things that work. And if the left goes completely unchecked, politically or in debate or dialogue, they will have hearings against the IDF before you know it in the Knesset. They will have massive riots of youth trying to say that we shouldn't, we should give all this land away. And if you don't believe me, whatever happens on campuses will soon be in Congress or soon be in the Knesset. Never forget, what happens in campus will soon be in the Knesset. This radical ideology will metastasize and grow very quickly. And leftism is an ideology of destruction. It's an ideology that from within there can be, it's almost as if everything before us has been a mistake. We must have radical redefinition. And I fight the left every single day. Why do they hate Israel? Why do they hate America? Well, first of all, they don't believe in God, most leftists. So the idea that two nations are founded on the idea of God drives them absolutely bananas. The second thing is they hate the idea that certain cultures, certain countries can be better than others. And Israel has been one of the greatest success stories in the history of the world. It really has been. The medical advancements, the technology, the entrepreneurship, the advancement of human rights, the respect for all people, the respect of human dignity is incredible. It really, really is. And the left doesn't want those success stories to be able to exist. And I see a lot of commonality, I have to tell you, between the motivations of the Palestinian Authority and the left that I deal with in America. They want to keep people permanently poor, because when you keep people permanently poor, you can control them. When you keep people permanently in control, then you can then stay in power for a very, very long time. Because let's say that the people living in Judea and Samaria or in the West Bank, all of a sudden they got richer and they had human rights and they saw the flourishment that Israel has been able to experience. This is a boss guy. I don't know what he's all about. He's got to get out of power. Hamas, goodbye. All of a sudden, the power that they have over people will disappear very quickly. It's easier to sell terrorism when the communities are impoverished and hopeless. And what has made Israel so amazing is not just the respect for all human rights, but you guys are a free enterprise machine here. You guys are now an economic powerhouse. You should applaud that. You really are. And imagine if that spread like wildfire in the West Bank. All this fear-mongering and all they would drop it down. And you see the success stories where that is happening in Judea, Samaria, where Arabs and Jews are working together. They become less radicalized after a couple decades. After a couple years, really, they become less radicalized. And so be very careful of the left in this country, because they would love nothing more than to keep themselves in power for a long period of time and to tear down the institutions. And what I saw in the Breaking the Silence folks, and we only saw them for a couple minutes, but I saw the anger, I saw the intensity. It reminds me of the American left. There's no difference. And they had a lot of the same funders, by the way. George Soros, the UN, all the people that hate Western civilization and hate Israel, and hate really what we stand for. And so you have to be very cognizant and very wary of that. So I do want to open up for some questions here and just have a really great dialogue. And I just want to thank everyone for being here. And I'll stay for as long as people want to ask questions. So. You said you had a question early on, so you had a perfect question, you said.
I had a perfect question, but...
And I'll repeat the question if you can't hear it.
Yeah,
so.
Okay. Here, I wrote it out. Okay. As we've seen lately in the U.S., anti-Semitic remarks and openly anti-Israel statements have become more or less norms, and we know that. That doesn't really surprise me given their rhetoric right now, but I've noticed a trend right now on the right that scares me also. A part of American conservatism is a fair amount of nationalism as well. Patriotism and loyalty to a country, to their country, are big facets of that. I've seen many people who tout conservative ideas talk down to Jews and conservative Jews in America, or just Jews in America, because they also have loyalty to Israel, and they accuse them of dual loyalty or shilling for Israel or things like that.
That's what they say to me.
Well, yeah. I'm an American, but I'm also Israeli.
Sure.
I came here when I was 17. I'm by myself. Without my family, I served in the IDF.
Give it up.
And I love both countries.
You should.
I see no problem in having dual loyalty. But I live here, so it doesn't bother me so much. Sorry. So my question is two-pronged. Okay. Sorry about that. So it's a little bit long. Do you think that this questioning of Jewish loyalty to America will breed blatant and outright anti-Semitism on the right as well, just like it has on the left? And also, do you consider the Jewish religious and Zionistic obligation to the land of Israel to be dual loyalty? And if so, what could be the ramifications of that for American Jews?
Okay, so the first question, so just to repeat the question, if you couldn't hear in the back, I'm guessing you only got bits and pieces. Prefaced by talking about the alleged rise of anti-Semitism in the conservative movement. I'm going to challenge that a little bit. I'll agree with part of it, but I'll challenge part of it. The second part was the idea of dual loyalty, and I don't like that term, and I'll tell you why. So if you didn't hear it in the back, I'm repeating it for your sake. So the first, I am as in the conservative movement as one could probably be. Anyone who is even a smidgen anti-Israel or anti-Semitic has no place in the American conservative movement. Nowhere. And I denounce them, and so do all of our leaders, every elected representative. Anywhere that evil pops itself up, we denounce it and we expel it. The left embraces it. The big difference. They elect anti-Semites to Congress. They put them on foreign relations committees. If anyone dares say anything anti-Semitic, I want nothing to do with them. Nothing. That's the big difference between American conservatives and the American left. Is evil is a cancer that will come no matter whatever side you're on. But it's what you do when you encounter evil that really judges the moral character of a movement and the moral health of a country. And so whenever I encounter it or whenever people encounter it, we take a stand against it. I think it's a little bit overblown. I wouldn't even call those people conservatives. I really wouldn't. Because there's nothing conservative to have that kind of hatred in your heart. But whenever I come across that kind of chatter, for example, I made 2 Instagram posts. I have somewhat of a big Instagram following. And you should go see it yourself. Thousands and thousands of anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist comments. I don't know who these people are. They're all masked identities. They might be 5 basement dwellers that hate themselves, and therefore they hate the world. And they say, Charlie, you're shilling for Zion, you're shilling for Jews. I mean, things you're talking about, I get times 10. Because they say, what's a Christian like you doing something like, you know. And
you see it as a threat to
well,
conservatism, because
well,
they say that you're, whatever. It's an
I'm getting there. Again, let me. So there's a question of dual loyalty. Look, why do I love America? I love America not because I was born there. It's because I love the ideas of America. I love countries that embrace good ideas. There's American Trinity just like there is a Christian Trinity. The Christian Trinity is God the Father and the Holy Spirit. The American Trinity is e pluribus unum, meaning out of many one. It's the Latin phrase. Liberty, which means you can do what you want to do, however you want to do it, as long as you don't harm someone else. And the phrase, in God we trust, which means first and foremost our rights come from God, not from government. These ideas, by the way, were really ironed out in Jerusalem thousands of years ago in the Torah. So why do I first and foremost love Israel? Because I love the ideas behind your country. That's not dual loyalty, that's harmonic, that's symbiotic. There's the idea that you must not love a country or love a country based simply on false national identity of these horrendous things of skin color or language or linguistics, that I do not embrace. And I think that's a misrepresentation of any sort of form of conservatism. And so why do I denounce, like I did earlier, Saudi Arabia? Because just recently Jews are now allowed to fly over Saudi Arabia because they said you were polluting the airspace. Okay? Where they kill women if they dare not cheat, but if they dare look at somebody wrong, you know, without a male's approval. Or, you know, just their women are now allowed to watch movies for the first time. Like, wow, that's a big human rights progression, right? Or they chop people's heads off in the public square. You know, where is the feminist movement going against Saudi Arabia, by the way? I mean, seriously, it's unbelievable. So I reject this idea of dual loyalty. I have loyalty to ideas. And of course I love the Grand Canyon, I love the Rocky Mountains, and I love Boston, and I love Chicago. But if all that disappeared and all I had was ideas, and we were on an island, that's America, that's Israel. And that's what people have to realize, that America's just a placeholder for timeless ideas. And if you fall too in love with, you know, oh, the specific place and all this, that's not what it is. Israel will be the exception because there is a holy connection to this land. And for Christians too. And that's what people don't realize is, if the Arabs were controlling this country, I would not be able to visit where Jesus taught at the Sea of Galilee, where I went today. If Arabs were controlling this land, I would not be able to go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. If Arab Muslims were controlling this land, no one in this room would be able to pray at the Western Wall. I can guarantee you that. And so it is the moral argument for accessibility of all three major monotheistic Abrahamic religions that Israel continues to exist. That the thousands of historical religious sites still have access. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to make sure the Jews don't have access to the few that you still want access to, right? Whether it be the Temple Mount or whether it be even Hebron. If they had their way, they would shut down that single street in Hebron and no one could be able to visit the building of the patriarchs. So I hope I answered that question with some nuance, but I really think that there's some positives and negatives happening right now in America. You know what one of the positives are? The positives are you have the most pro-Israel president in American history. That's a positive. It's really amazing. You know what the negative is? Israel is now a partisan issue in America. It's a very, very scary thing. I want Democrats and Republicans to be able to agree on Israel. I really do. This is the power of the left. The left will teach poisonous ideas to a generation, and 20 years later, you'll have a political party that is so radicalized, they're completely unrecognizable. And that's the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party of the 80s and 90s, they were pro-Israel. It was, 99-0 used to vote for the embassy to be moved. Now, 0 Democrats attend the embassy move to Jerusalem in the ceremony. 0. 0 elected Democrats came on that beautiful day when the embassy was moved to the rightful capital of Israel. 0 Democrats. And I'm sorry? Joe Lieberman's not an elected official. He used to be. And he's not even he's independent. And boy, I'll tell you, he's more Republican than conservative now. But 0. And in fact, if you look at when Bibi Netanyahu, your prime minister, came and spoke in front of the United States Congress in 2013, there were dozens and dozens of elected Democrats that walked out in protest, if you remember this. And it really makes me sick that it's become a partisan issue, because this should be something of widespread agreement. And I hope to make it that again one day. I really do. But also, here's the positive wrinkle, is the Republican Party has never been as pro-Israel as it has been right now. And I can attribute that, and here's who has Israel's back. And I had a debate once with some J Street guy, big mistake for him. And he said, I'm really worried that Christians like you are trying to tell us what to do with your country. And I said, well, evangelical Christians in America are one of the biggest allies that Israel have in the entire world. And that is true. That is very true. So I hope that answered it. So, right, orange. Yeah, right. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It's kind of bright, so I'm trying to see. There you go.
You spoke about the left's attempt to reach more power. And you said it was encompassing and similar to what's happening here in Israel and in Europe and in the States. Essentially, we have an imperial power, the European Union, who works to subvert wherever it can take foothold.
Yeah.
We have similar agents. We had a European president in America just a few years ago, and we still have bastions in academia, deep state,
yeah.
Media, and they see the same utopian obliteration as their goal. How do we unite against an imperial force?
Yeah, so great. Well, look, here's the thing, is that how do we unite against the imperial force? I mean, they're very well funded. The media is so against this country and against America. It's unbelievable to me. It really is. And I'll tell you, the best way to really fight what we're fighting is to do more of what, Im Tirtzu and what Turning Point USA is doing, which you have to go to the difficult places. I go to the most violent college campuses in America that you could possibly go to, and I say this very message. And I will debate the leftists, and I'll debate the SJP, which, honestly, I have some big questions of where their money is coming from, by the way, SJP. And I think we should really do some big investigations further there, because I think it's Hamas, honestly. It very well could be. And someone needs to do an investigation into the money flow. I think some people have, but they're so radical. It's unbelievable, SJP. If you don't know what that is, it's Students for Justice in Palestine, which it's amazing to me. And this is just, it's not a statement that is anything but factual. But you have these privileged, entitled brats in America that grew up in the best communities in the world. In the world. I'm talking about mansions and net worths in the tens of millions. And they'll go to Stanford, and they'll go to Yale, and they'll go to Harvard. Maybe their parents paid to get them in. Who knows? Who knows? And they think they're doing the righteous and moral thing by fighting against Israel, and they'll all of a sudden be wearing an SJP shirt. And they think they're on the right side of history. And then you ask them with the map, show me the West Bank. Show me where Judea and Samaria is. Where is Gaza? Where are the Golan Heights? And they'll call you racist. That's essentially how that's exactly what they'll say in return. It doesn't work so well when, you have, Candace Owens, who's a black woman next to that, say something like that, right? But I will say that you have to fight. And I think that's what Israel has gotten right over the last 50 or 60 years, is if you're not willing to fight for what you believe in and what you care for, the enemy will take over in a second. And I wish there was a more simple answer than that. Yes?
First of all, thank you very much for all the work you're doing with Turning Point in America. And it's what you and Im Tirtzu here in Israel going after the college-age kids, it's unbelievable. So really, kol hakavod, as we say in Hebrew. Since you're dealing with college, my question is as follows. The Saudis, Wahhabism, has been funding textbooks, has been buying textbook companies, has been financing the Middle East Studies fellowship schools in universities, not for 5 years, not for 10 years, for more than 30 years. And part of what's going on in America today on college campuses is because that has gone on with no pushback, no publicity, nothing fighting it.
Totally.
What is being done, or what plans are being done to bring that to the floor to hopefully stop it and assist you? I mean, everything you're doing is important, but if more and more university professors and schools are going across with the funding and the brainwashing,
I'll repeat it.
Then we're not going to be able to make any change.
So the question was the spread of Wahhabism, the origination, Saudi funding, which I mentioned. So I have to understand in the States that for the last 20 or 30 years, there's been this kind of quiet ignoring of Saudi Arabia, and I mentioned this earlier, and I'm putting an end to that. I just am. And some people say I shouldn't. Some people say we need them as an ally. But then I see what they're doing to fund the madrasas and the Wahhabism and the terrorism. And I think Iran is a huge problem. I've said that, and I believe they are a huge problem. But you just pointed out that it is a money flow in the hundreds of billions of dollars throughout the decades that has gone through this hateful and horrible ideology, not to mention what they did with 9/11. And Senator Rand Paul has been very, very good on this. And you hate Al-Qaeda? The Saudis just gave a bunch of weapons to Al-Qaeda-linked groups a couple months ago. That's not good. Those weapons could end up in Hamas. So what do you do about it? First of all, what Trump has done asymmetrically to open up the energy reserves in America is one of the greatest things to cut off the cash flow in the Middle East. And I think that in the next 10 years, the United States should sign a pact that they will not buy any more Middle Eastern oil at all. And watch this region improve dramatically, because they will not have that constant cash flow from the West. And the United States has more natural gas and more oil reserves than we ever thought possible, thanks to the new technology fracking, where the environmentalists aren't able to shut this down. And so I think there needs to be a broader conversation and a web and a recognition of where a lot of this terror funding is coming from. And a lot of these attacks that you see in Europe are inspired in Wahhabist mosques. They just are. And that is a Sunni strand that the House of Saud has had a partnership over the last 20, 30 years. That's terrorism. That's the direct funding of terrorism that I think we have not shined a light on appropriately throughout the years. And so I appreciate the question. I'm going to continue to shine a light on it. And some people in America say, we got to be friends with them. I don't think we should. I think 9/11 was enough 3,000 Americans died at the hands of Saudi Arabia. I don't think we should. So I appreciate the question very much. Thank you. Yes.
Israel, beside, I want to talk about the difference between the two parties, the Republican and the Democrat Party.
I'll repeat it. So.
If you go 20 years ago, the people who are old enough to know, for an Israeli or for somebody who doesn't live in the States, the difference between the Republican Party and the Democrat Party wasn't that big.
Yeah.
And it seems like since Obama came, the Democrat Party, infanticide and abortion, they went all the way left. And my question to you is, where do you think it's going?
Yeah.
Is it coming? Is going to come back or?
So great question. Repeat it in the back. 30 years ago, the Republican and Democrat parties were not that far apart. There were radicals on both sides. Now they're more far apart than ever before in American politics. And the Republicans haven't moved that much, honestly.
Clinton said, let's make America great again.
Right. Clinton used to say, let's make America great again, build the wall, all these sorts of things. Obama changed everything. You have to realize this. Because for those of you that don't know, there's a book by the name of an author, Saul Alinsky. Saul Alinsky wrote the book Rules for Radicals. This playbook is being used against your country from within. If you do not know Saul Alinsky, you have to read this book. The dedication to Rules for Radicals is to Lucifer, is actually to the fallen angel, who Saul Alinsky calls as the first original rebel. Go figure that out, right? In the book, it talks about the best radical is not actually the radical that waves the flag in the streets and smashes the window. A true radical will lie about their identity, will take the highest position of power possible, and then implement steady change in that position of power over a long period of time, pretending to be someone that they aren't. And the Rules for Radicals is the playbook of the international left now. And they did this through Obama, because what the left realized is how far left they could actually push America without getting too much backlash. And they took over the universities, they took over the media, and they started to push forth this unbelievably dangerous radical ideology. So you ask the question, where is this going? The American left is not going anywhere. They're going to become more radical, more Marxist. They're going to become more, I would say, emboldened to put forth their positions. You have to realize something. We, Israelis, American conservatives, people that are on the right, we want that ideal of e pluribus unum. We actually want peace. We want to be able to participate in our own life. What type of person would want chaos? Someone who wants chaos is someone who wants power. Because when things are disrupted, you can easily take power. When things are kind of out of the ordinary, that's where coups can happen. That's where people can assume a lot of control very, very quickly. That's what the left is doing in America. Whether it be police officers against citizens, black against whites, now they're turning Jews against Christians. They're trying all this sort of stuff.
So what are you saying? The Democrat Party won't be...
The Democrat Party...
They won't be in the presidency anymore?
No, the Democrat Party might win because America has gone way further to the left than people realize. The college campuses are one of the biggest threats to the entire world. The cancerous ideology that is being taught about your very country. And what's amazing to me, I'm flying over the country in the helicopter and I'm looking at these beautiful settlements and I'm thinking to myself, what's the big focus on this country? I love Israel, I love this, but they have entire Israel apartheid weeks dedicated on U.S. college campuses for a country the size of New Jersey where human rights are respected and free enterprise is allowed. And it's honestly, it's anti-Semitism is what it is. And it's gone back thousands and thousands of years. And it is rooted in such horrific hatred. And so look, I wish the American left still held this position. I wish that they were pro-Israel, but they're not. And I don't think, look, if you get President Bernie Sanders, you can laugh, but I'll tell you right now, it is a possibility in 2020. It's not a likely thing. I don't think it's likely, but it is a possibility. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen within the first week, okay? The embassy gets shut down first week and gets moved back to wherever it was. The funding to the Palestinian Authority gets restored. The Iran deal gets renewed. And the 67 borders will get introduced as a resolution in the UN in the first week. That's President Bernie Sanders. That's the American left. In the first week. And I want you to think about what that would mean for your country if the 67 borders were reinstituted, where the plateau that exists over Tel Aviv, where they'd be able to shoot missiles into the most populated area of your country. I mean, the erosion of your borders would be absolutely unbelievable. So you have to be very, very careful here. And I believe Trump will win re-election. I really do. I'm a huge supporter of the president, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure he wins re-election. But it's very scary, and this is why the work on American campuses is so important to educate about this this wonderful and beautiful country. And I'm going to use my millions of followers to continue to spread the knowledge that I learned here the last couple days. Because look, it bothers me when lies are allowed to get away with. It really, really does. And I pursue them vigorously. I really do, viciously. And I think, righteously angry at times. I think everyone should. When people lie about America, when people lie about our history, or they lie about, all those things. I get now equally as angry when I'm going to hear people lie about the supposed apartheid in Israel. What are you talking about? You know where the apartheid is in Hebron, where the Jews aren't allowed in the Arab quarter. That's the only apartheid that I saw firsthand. Which was very, so anyway, that was a, you. Yes, you're right there with your hand up. Yes, let's get.
First of all, I really want to thank you for coming in. I know it's a long flight from the States. I've done it many times. So
I've met you before, haven't I?
Have
maybe?
we?
I don't know.
I don't
you look
know.
familiar.
Maybe. It could be. I actually want to take this conversation a little bit, actually to the left. I want to ask you, how do you define the left?
Sure.
Because it has been a main topic of tonight, and I really want to understand.
Great question. I should have done that from the beginning.
Thank you.
So there's a difference between liberals and leftists. Okay? It's a very big difference. A liberal is someone I will disagree with, and we'll have a wonderful time. We'll go out to dinner, and we'll consider each other friends. A liberal is someone that might believe in gay marriage. They might believe in more accessible abortion. They might believe in higher taxes, and they might believe in maybe more social welfare programs. That's a liberal. A liberal will agree to disagree. A liberal will have the conversation, and they'll say, we might not agree on this, but I still treat you with respect, and I really like you as a person. A leftist will try to shut you up before you even open your mouth. A leftist does not believe in capitalism whatsoever. A leftist is rooted in intolerance. And you see this happen all over the place in America, where college campuses get shouted down. You heard my message tonight. Do you think I'm a hateful speaker? Do you think I bring vitriol? I get labeled by groups on the left in America that I should not be allowed to speak on U.S. campuses. That I'm somehow spreading vitriol and hatred, and I'm spreading dangerous ideas. There's a difference between a liberal and a leftist. I'll give you an example. You know who a liberal is? Alan Dershowitz is a liberal. I love Alan Dershowitz. We need more people like Alan Dershowitz. Alan Dershowitz believes in more accessible abortion. I don't agree with that. That's a conversation I can have. But he believes in free speech. And he believes in the free flow of ideas. He believes in market-based economies, right? He might disagree with the amount, I'll disagree with the amount of social welfare that needs to be given out. We could have a conversation about tax rates, but it's fine. A leftist is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Yeah. That's a leftist, where she says people like me should not be able to speak because it's hate speech. She thinks that capitalism has been a mistake. She thinks that Israel is a figment of our imagination and this should all be called Palestine. That's a leftist. And so when I say the American left, it is a combination of ideologies that has metamorphosized, but it comes from a place of anger. It comes from a place, so there's two ways to interpret, and I always say this about America, but you can say this about Israel, and I think it applies really well. It applies really well. You can either be thankful you live in America or Israel, or angry you live in America or Israel. If you're thankful, you're more likely to be on the conservative or on the right. I think it applies here, right? If you're angry, you're more likely to be on the left. And if you're super angry, you want to destroy everything, you are a leftist. And that used to be a fringe ideology in the United States. It used to be, honestly, something that had very little representation. Now it's the majority part of the American Democrat Party. I don't think it's a majority here in Israel, but I hear it's growing very quickly. Well, okay, maybe it's not, God willing. Okay, so it's not growing. But I will say, with the leftist, it's a mixture of three big words. And these are heavy words, and they come with a lot of weight, but I could explain them on hours. It's a mixture of Marxism, it's a mixture of fascism, and it's a mixture of postmodernism. So it's a mixture of Marxism, which believes in this utopian idea that there should be no differences between people, there should be no money, it should be a classless society. Foolish. It's rooted in fascism, which means you should shut people up and use force at will when you disagree with somebody. And postmodernism, which is a philosophy that stems from France. All bad ideas come from France, and that believes that there's no such thing as absolute truth. They believe that the idea of God has been a mistake, and that's essentially a new blend of Marxism. That is the American left. You know what a liberal will come up after this speech? There might be liberals here. They'll say, Charlie, I didn't agree with the word you said, but I loved it, and I'll keep following you. That's a liberal. Great. I love listening to Alan Dershowitz, even though I disagree with him. And so that's kind of, I thank you for asking that question, but that difference has now existed more than ever between leftists and liberals. So, yes.
So, I'm also an American Israeli. I came here in 19.
Wonderful.
And I love both countries. I love the Constitution, greatest political document.
Amen.
But my question is you said you're an economics guy, and I like economics too. I'm kind of against American foreign aid to Israel. I'm against American foreign aid to all countries, just to be clear. And I think it's because America, like, they're sending their money to Israel when it should be going to American citizens to fund their army and their government. And for the Israelis, we have a philosophy where we don't like to buy foreign weapons because it never really worked out for us. And then, if you know the history. And also, it just it gives foreign players a seat at the negotiations between Israel and quote-unquote Palestine, which is an imaginary country between Narnia and Wakanda. So I wanted to hear your opinion on it.
Sure.
And maybe you agree, disagree. And if you disagree, please do it lightly.
So it's a great question. The question was American aid to Israel. So there's a huge discussion amongst the American left to cut aid to Israel. And I don't agree with that at all. But I first start the conversation. I say, hold on a second. I say, hold on. You want to cut foreign aid? How about we stop funding countries that burn the American flag? Can we start there? Since you're so into, like, all of a sudden, why the Jews? That's what I always ask the left. No, I'm not saying you. I'm not saying you. I'm just saying, like, I'm saying the American left focuses on, like, the singular issue of Israel. From what I understand, the aid that America gives Israel is a mixture of subsidized weaponry purchases and things of that nature. I actually need to do more research of the complexity of that agreement. But I support it for a variety of different reasons. First of all, this is like a little America in the Middle East around a sea of tyranny. And I believe that America has a moral obligation to continue to support Israel in its quest to protect its holy land, its people, and its ability to defend itself. And I mean, I went and I saw Abrams tanks today at IDF installations. I went around and I saw American weaponry. So that does reaffirm that there is some, transactional relationship between American-made, weapons and, the Israeli army. Also, I'm guessing that some of the aircraft that you guys are using are American as well, and the American training, so on and so forth. Secondly, it's important to remember that the American economy is benefited by a peaceful Israel. There is billions and billions of dollars a day of positive economic progress that happens between America and Israel, whether it be medical advancements, patent breakthroughs. Technion University, Waze, for example, was innovated here by an Israeli entrepreneur. So there is an economic argument that the $5 billion or whatever it is, $5.8 billion that America spends on aid in Israel, we get back in tens of billions, hundreds of billions in economic productivity and output. Can anybody tell me the positives that we get in foreign aid by giving money to the Palestinian Authority? Can anyone give me that? No, not. We give money to them so they can burn the American flag and say death to Israel, death to America. Well, thank you. Should we send you flags next time so you can just burn them for us? I mean, right, exactly. I mean, maybe we'll just send them with the check. We'll wrap the check in the flag. You could deposit the check, then just burn it on your way there. It's absolutely unbelievable. I think the conversation in the States gets slanted way too quickly. They want to cut the funding immediately to the single country that we actually have a beautiful trade relationship with. And I can tell you that Intel Core Processing, which is an amazing American company, has, I think, its second biggest data center right near the Gaza Strip. We flew over it today. That's a beautiful relationship there that needs to be preserved and protected. So that's my answer, and I hope you agree with part of it. So I want to get a young woman. Yes. But I was there because everyone was calling him, but I do want to make sure we're... You can identify with whatever gender you want, right? Exactly.
every day the tourists come to Israel and to Jerusalem and ask the Arab and ask the Arabs of the Muslim what the people in the city of Jerusalem told him just Arabs, Muslim, and Jewish,
Do you want to ask in Hebrew? Tell me in Hebrew really quick, and then you can. Yeah. So we'll take another one while that's getting translated.
I want to know why is it that tourists that come to Israel don't know that there are a lot of Christian Arabs that are here?
Okay, the question is, tourists that come to Israel, why don't they know that a lot of Christian Arabs are here? I actually learned that myself firsthand. I think the Western media doesn't want that message to get out, honestly, because I think they knew that if a lot of the world knew there were Christian Arabs, more people would support Israel. I think that would be my...
I am supporting.
I love it. We need more like you. So, I want to guess.
I also want to thank you for coming here.
Thank you.
I've loved watching videos of you, and if you can next time bring Candace Owens, I think we'll all So my question to you is, so the left has taken over, well, it pretty much controls the culture in the U.S. at this point. And as you said, culture comes first, and then comes laws, and that's what ends up ruling the country. So my question is, how can the right, how can conservatives really band together and take the culture back?
So, I mean, taking the culture back, it's so important. The question was about taking the culture back. The left controls politics, they control Hollywood, they control media, and even in the phrasing of this whole kind of conflict is very misleading. And I was reading a piece this morning in the Washington Post by Ilana Moore. It was one of her, it was an op-ed where she said, you know, it's really misleading how the media continues to frame what's going on. And I said, what are you talking about? And of course, I mean, she thinks it's misleading. She thinks it's slanted in the direction of Israel. Just to give an idea of how they interpret what the media communication lines, which is incredible to me. Look, more conservatives need to go into culture. They need to go into Hollywood. They need to go into movie making and content creation. And so it's not an easy one-based solution, but it's something that far too people, you know, the left, they treasure cultural monopolization, and it's something we need to take a lot more seriously. So let's get in the back there. Yeah.
Hi. A bit different from the American crew from the United Kingdom.
UK.
No, definitely not French. Yeah, there you go. These last few days, we've been witnessing pretty much the demise of the Democrats who voted for Brexit via the disloyal politicians. And as an American coming from a country founded on the principles of taxation without representation is tyranny, I wanted to know what were the centers of opinion for Brexit in the United States? What do people think of Brexit in the United States?
Sure, I mean, the question was about Brexit. I mean, in America, if you supported Donald Trump, you probably were a supporter of a Brexit, and if you supported Hillary Clinton, you didn't. It is, honestly, this is one of the biggest modern-day disgraces in Western democracy that I've ever seen. The people of the UK spoke. They said they wanted to leave the European Union, and for 2.5 years, the ruling class has now muddied this up and has prevented their voice from being heard. You might totally disagree with the ruling, but if the people don't have that sort of mechanism to rebalance power or to have their voice be heard, then what's next? What are people supposed to do then? Are they supposed to picket in the streets? They're supposed to do what the French do and just, you know, protest because it's Saturday? They protest everything. They don't even know what they're protesting anymore. That's fine. It's very French. I could go on with my French jokes, but I won't. They were helpful to Israel long back, so that was the one thing they did right. But it's really unbelievable to me, and that's kind of the dichotomy going in the West right now, is how much power can the ruling class hold on to without the people being able to put a check and balance against it? Brexit was very little about actually exiting the European Union. It was an exercise in anti-elitism, in the restoration of the idea of Britain, and should Brussels be more important than London? That's what really the conversation was about. And honestly, It's been a total disgrace. It really has been. In America, we would not have put up with this, I'll tell you. It would be like we elected Donald Trump and then the Electoral College says, no, we choose Hillary Clinton. That's essentially what was happening right now in Brexit. It's a total and complete disgrace. So hope you guys get it sorted out. If not, stay here. So, yes. Yeah. No, back. I'm sorry. And then we'll get to you. Well, yeah, hold that whole group over there. Sure.
Hey, first of all, thank you so much for coming here, and we really appreciate it. My question is, I've been seeing in the past couple of years an uprising of self-hatred. What I mean by that is, people, mainly atheists, really hate themselves, the people and their religion, especially here in Israel. And in those same people, I see that they give lots of interest in Islam, and they really respect other religions that aren't theirs. And my question is, how do you think we should fight that and bring back the self-love of people who really hate their own religion, but they're open-minded to other religions?
The question was about self-hatred. I will start. One of the most ironic things I have to do every single year is I go to college campuses and I have to tell Jews why they should love Israel. No, it's one of the most unbelievable things I've ever done in my life, where I have to tell Jews that this is a moral and good country. I'll let you guys all figure out why that is. I'm not going to try to tell you that. There's a lot of different theories I have. I actually still haven't totally figured it out. But American Jews are some of the most anti-Israel people that I've come across in the States, actually. It's absolutely unbelievable. Militantly anti-Israel, too. It's incredible. I mean, Bernie Sanders is technically Jewish, and he hates Israel. What? Okay, so you reaffirm. So you could, so I don't mean that as a slight. I don't think he practices Judaism. Is that correct? Okay, so that's why I say that. And yeah, he's a Marxist, right? And so I will say that the left is driven by hatred and anger. Do you realize how angry these people are all the time? It's always, they have no conclusion of what they actually want. They want total and complete destruction. I always say they hate the rich a lot more than they love the poor. They want to see people toppled down from their current platform. And if you gave the left an option, or if you gave socialists an option, would you rather have less rich people or more people become rich? Every time they would say we'd rather have less rich people. Every single time. Because for them, they exploited someone to get it. And so one of the core things that I really talk about at Turning Point USA is market economics, and it's called capitalism. I prefer the term free market because I think it's more accurate. Capitalism is actually a Marxist term that was created to malign the free market. And no matter where you are in the world, no matter where you come from or what value system you were raised in, markets work. They just do. And Israel is an amazing example of this, with very, very little natural resources and people clustered together in a small country under constant threat from neighboring countries. You're still by far the most economically productive, and you're around countries that have abundant natural resources. I mean, as you know, and it's incredible what you have been able to do just because of market principles work. And what is the market? I mean, it's allowing free people to pursue their ideas free of intrusive government intervention. And that's why Israel has one of the highest, if not the highest, rates of entrepreneurship in the world. Which is amazing, which is essentially the likelihood of starting businesses and having technological breakthroughs, so on and so forth, which is one of the great success stories of this country. And so, look, the left will hate because they never could have succeeded in a market economy themselves. And that's something really important to remember. So, yes, right here.
So we've identified that there's a cross-border, let's call it leftist movement that exists
international leftist movement
that exists irrespective of borders, of international borders. Is there an identifiable conservative movement that where ideas pass through countries? And
yeah, it would be Turning Point. We have a Turning Point Israel now.
Or is it just us sitting in a park?
Well, I mean, this will probably get me in a lot of trouble, but I would love. People say, Charlie, what does success look like? In 20 years, I would love to have the same global impact for freedom and national sovereignty that George Soros had for leftism and Marxism. That would be success for me, seriously. And I look at what he has done, and you can use your own words to describe him, but the facts speak for themselves. I mean, he is $1 billion funding mechanism against everything that we hold near and dear.
What's in it for him?
that you guys can answer that question yourself. I'm not going to get into the motive picking of George Soros. You guys can figure that out himself. He's an angry person. Let's just put it that way. He's very angry. And we'll get, it's okay. So look, there needs to be a revival. And here's what it's not. I'm going to tell you what I'm not, though. And it's very important to reiterate this because I get mislabeled all the time. And anyone who knows who I am and what I stand for, I believe in the American Trinity of E pluribus unum, in God we trust, and liberty. What we're not is some of these horrible, divisive, terrible voices in Europe that are popping up that believe in ethno-nationalism. I don't believe in that. I just don't. And that should be denounced by everybody. And people try to loop me into that garbage, and it's just not true. And so what we need is a true global movement around the ideas of a nation state, around market economies, around individual rights, the sanctity of the individual, right of expression, religious freedom, and not globalist top-down policies that try to erode all these different things. For the worse, by the way. And so the answer is no, there really isn't a global movement there. There's bits and pieces of that. I think it needs to continue to flourish and grow. And Turning Point's now in the United Kingdom, which is amazing. And now we're in Israel, which is great. And we're working with our wonderful friends here. But we'll see what happens. And but never forget, though, we have to keep focused on America because the world goes really as America goes. I know that sounds a little bit, self-righteous as an American, but it's true. It's just true. And if America falls, a lot of other tumbling blocks will follow after. It's just the way it is. And so it's very, very important to keep America strong and in the correct posture. So, yes. And then we'll get to you. So we'll go there. Yeah. Yeah, we will.
Well, first off, I want to thank you for coming specifically to Jerusalem, which is, the capital of Israel, not Tel Aviv.
Yes.
I want to say I live in Samaria. I actually came down here for your talk tonight, which is exciting. It's no secret that the Palestinian Authority is not exactly the nicest of ruling bodies in the West Bank, and they really do oppress all of the Arabs that live there, and it's not a great situation. And I know I've spoken to Arab friends of mine who have agreed that if Israel were to annex the Judea and Samaria, that it would be better for really everybody involved. It would be under Israeli government and protection first and foremost. My question to you is if you think that conservatives in the U.S. or even the U.S. would support such a thing if Israel were to go ahead and annex the West Bank.
Yeah, the question was the annexation of the West Bank. I mean, would conservatives in America support it? Probably most of them. I mean, look, I'm careful not to tell countries that I don't live in what to do, but that is Israel, if you ask me. And I know what the laws of Israel pertain to, and I see the dignity you have for human rights. And I would challenge anyone living under PA regime versus Israeli regime, which one is better for its citizens, and it's not even close. And so I personally would support it, and I don't consider that to be a controversial position. I don't even know if that's on the table, but we'll see. So, yeah, the next question here.
I hope that I just not gonna repeat anything that was asked before here, but I'm really interested about all the academic aspects. Do you think, what do you think is the right step for conservatives? Is it better to go and to academic institutions and change things from the inside, or is it better to establish new institutions?
So the question was, is it better to change things from the outside, inside, or establish new institutions? And it should be a mixture of both. We can't stop sending students in the States to Ivy League schools or to schools out west just because they're horrible places. We need truth seekers there too. I was at Stanford last year during Israel Apartheid Week, and the 3 or 4 Turning Point USA students that we had that understood the Israel issue, because few do and few are afraid because these SJP guys are pretty well trained. So just so you know, what SJP will do, the Students for Justice of Palestine, they'll come in the week before Apartheid Week and they'll host all these trainings and these PowerPoint presentations for these above average IQ students at Stanford. And these Stanford imbeciles, honestly, these brats, most of them, and I call them that intentionally because they really don't know it. They think they become experts. You know, they think, oh yes, I'm so smart because I attended a PowerPoint presentation last night on, you know, Palestinian oppression or something like that. And then they'll put, what they actually will do is they will they'll actually build a wall on campus, if you're not familiar with this, and which is kind of interesting. But what they'll do is they'll have all the different kind of complaints of the Palestinians and all these lies, and Sophia's nodding her head because she does an amazing job for us at Turning Point USA, and she really does. And she fights it all the time. But you have to understand that if they go completely unopposed, then they win. They want that. They want to kick every conservative or Israel supporter out of the institution. They want to cleanse it. They want to cleanse these institutions of differing thoughts. So we can't let that happen. But we also must continue to create our own institutions where these ideas are allowed to be researched and given credibility. And in the States, there's very few. I mean, the academy in America has done such a disservice to this country because you'll have these. They're so overeducated. It takes a doctorate degree to believe how stupid the stuff they believe is. It's absolutely unbelievable. And they have this PhD after them in Middle Eastern studies, and then they'll say something anti-Israel or even anti-Semitic. Well, I have a PhD. How could I possibly be wrong? And unfortunately, you're then in like an accreditation war where we need PhD people too, like Dershowitz, that can actually talk about, you know, why the Balfour Declaration was correct and why the UN resolutions allow the state of Israel, because we're in a then, well, I have a doctorate, you don't, therefore I'm correct. And you know from any sort of basic second grade training of logical fallacies, one of the first logical fallacies they'll teach you is an argument from authority, which is somehow I'm correct because I've been around longer or I have more degrees. But unfortunately, that's where a lot of the conversation goes to, where, well, these 9 people have doctorates. They say we should kill all the Jews, but you know they must be right because they're doctorates at Yale. And I'm somewhat over-exaggerating, but essentially there are doctorates in America that say Israel should be eliminated. They just say, you know, IDF should be completely disarmed, and whatever happens, happens. That's a position in some doctorates, which is completely absurd. Which is, yeah, that's about right. So, okay, let's yes. Actually, no, you've been waiting patiently. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm a student from Haifa University.
Welcome.
But originally, I'm from Nairobi, Kenya.
Yeah.
Very quick reactions. One is, one of the things that you have just said right now about wanting to go toe-to-toe with Soros, that is one of the keys to the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Therefore, you should definitely work on that. But very quickly in Israel, I think we need to encourage people to go down to Samaria and Judea and live there. I've been working in this country back and forth since 2008, and there's some people I can't convince to come down to Samaria and Judea with me. I'm just so surprised. So while you're out there, please make us want to go down and stay in Judea and Samaria. And then lastly, we need to think a little beyond Israel and America in building a global alliance for Israel and for America. Because at the UN, it is votes which count.
That's right.
And Africa is basically neglected. However, the Soros you're talking about are organizing out there on college campuses. Just a few days ago, we had the issue of Ocasio-Cortez's Green Deal.
Yep.
We had a march out there in Nairobi at the campus, but I've never heard anyone talking about conservative ideals in Africa and on college grounds.
This is Soros.
So we need to get out there and build an alliance for Israel beyond the U.S. and beyond Israel.
I totally agree. And totally agree. And a couple countries where there's huge potential right now is Brazil, huge potential with the new president, and India. India is a huge potential country to build at least stable relations with Israel. India, in some ways, can sympathize with the Israeli situation, because India has immense tolerance for religious freedom. You have to realize that a minority religion in India means like 30 million people believe it. No, seriously, that's like a minority position. And President Modi is a decent man. He is someone that I believe, in my own reading, has been more pro-Israel than not. I could be wrong. Someone could correct me on that. But he's definitely not been anti. And India will be a global superpower in the decades to come. So I see a lot of potential there. I really, really do. And I hope all of you in the international efforts here do everything you can. And Brazil is another country with the new president. He's very decent. He believes in a lot of the same values that we do here. And Bolsonaro is his name. And I'll tell you that a country that you have to really watch out for, though, is China. China is a very, very big problem. And for America and for the West, and I don't know yet for Israel, I wouldn't be surprised, though, in the next couple of decades that China starts to ally itself through proxies. And they already have. I mean, North Korea is essentially a subsidized Chinese state. And who gets on the phone every day with Pyongyang? Tehran. Iran and North Korea talk, and North Korea and China. I mean, North Korea is very subservient to China. So you got to be very, very careful with China. But I like to see all the Chinese students that come here and learn the truth about Israel. I think it's a very positive thing. I really do. But they have essentially they have a dictator now. Xi Jinping is going to be dictator until he dies, which is really, really scary. And they're trying to take over the entire world. They're building islands in the South China Sea. They're buying up a lot of Central and Sub-Saharan Africa, violating natural mineral rights and doing all sorts of scary things. But there should be an international movement behind these ideas, the ideas that built Western civilization. And I'm very, very, very bullish on India. I really am. I think there's a lot that could come out of that country to put a lot of things in check. I mean, they have 1 billion people. Think about that. 1 billion people just in India. And they have a lot of respect for religious freedom, obviously, because with Hinduism and Buddhism and Islam and Christianity all able to express in their own capacity there. So point very well taken. I appreciate it very much. So yes. I'm trying to get in the back. You. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. My name is Eliyahu. I grew up in Philadelphia.
Philadelphia.
Yeah, the birthplace of American freedom.
Yeah.
Anyways, I heard what you were saying about individualism and your aversion to what you call ethnic nationalism?
Ethno-nationalism, yeah.
Ethno-nationalism? Right. I wanted to offer things from what I think is an Israeli perspective and explain to you just briefly why I think our experience with that term is a little bit different than what Americans might experience. And I understand the negativity surrounded by that term, and Jews have definitely taken a lot of bit on the losing end and suffered a lot from its consequences. But I would say that in a country like Israel and in this part of the world where people are so attached to their traditional identities, oftentimes ruling coalitions are done on ethnic grounds, and so issues of individuality are oftentimes less important. And for one thing, the social cohesion that you have in this country as a result of, spin it in a different way, but Jewish nationalism, the cohesion that you have on a social level is one of the strongest points of strength that this country has. And it might be uncomfortable in certain circumstances intellectually to defend it, but regardless, I feel fairly confident to say that my connection to left-wing Jews in this country is far stronger than my connection to conservative Arabs or other minorities, even though I have very much respect for them. That's the question.
So no, it's good. No, this is a really important point. It's very thoughtful. So if you stay standing for 1 minute, I'll push back a little bit, because what I've learned, what's really been amazing to me in my continued study of Judaism is that it's not inherently ethnic in race. It's not. There's a lost tribe of Jews in the Malaysian area, for example, or in Morocco, or in Africa. Jews can come from all different parts of the world. Where the ethno-nationalism I'm critiquing is there's a certain race that you must be, or else that is somehow subpar. And I totally reject that completely, totally. And that's ethno-nationalism, totally. And I kind of understand what you're saying. Don't agree with it totally. But do you want to make a point in response to that, or?
I definitely understand what you're saying. I would just add that even though you're describing a certain amount of diversity within the Jewish people, traditionally we hold that we do have some sort of genetic connection, and I think that that basis is very strong and irreplaceable for our cohesion in this country.
Okay, well, I will say, at least from my experience, and I don't want to speak too much from authority here, get it, huh? But there's Romanian Jews, there's Eastern European Jews, there's Middle Eastern Jews, Moroccan Jews. I've heard that there's Jamaican Jews. So I would look at Judaism as first and foremost what it is, which is a religion. And from my understanding, the practice of Judaism, while evangelizing is not a component of the religion, anyone, if they follow the tenets, can convert to Judaism. Whereas if you are in one of these horrific ethno-nationalist movements, there's no converting to do it if you don't look like them. So that would be me agreeing and disagreeing a little bit just on terms. Does that make a little bit of sense? So I appreciate the question very much, though. Thank you. Yes?
What strategy or what message do you think would be the most effective in fighting the left?
What strategy and what message is most successful in fighting the left? Well, the best way to fight lies is to go straight head on. And that doesn't mean you have to be angry. That doesn't mean you have to be upset. In my own personal experience, if you watch my videos and you watch my work, I learned this from the Jewish tradition, which is ask questions. It's the best way to get the other side to scramble for an answer that they do not have. It's built into the Jewish tradition, which they have dialogue and discourse and disagreement, and I do it quite often. If you look at my videos, you look at kind of my speeches. That's what I do when I talk to somebody. I don't ever tell a leftist, "Oh, you're wrong." I say, "Well, if socialism works so well, why are people fleeing from Cuba to Florida and not from Florida to Cuba?" It's a lot more effective to phrase it that way than to say, "Did you know that people are fleeing from Cuba to Florida, not from Florida to Cuba?" It's a lot different phrasing to say, "Why is it? Tell me why." All of a sudden, it's in their camp. They have to justify their bad idea back to you, which is something that has been very, very successful in my kind of speaking. So. I think we have time for a couple more. My friend from the media with the Indianapolis Colts hat. So, American football.
What are your hopes or concerns on the upcoming Trump plan as it relates to
Yeah, I keep getting asked about this.
Especially since we've been here now for a couple of days.
Sure. I mean, look, people are asking me what I think about the plan of the century coming. I know nothing about it. I have no inside information. I have no idea about any of it. But look, I know the people working on it, and I have such great respect for Jared Kushner and for the people in the White House. I really do. And they've done some phenomenal deals. They're not as tough as this one. This one's this one is the deal of the century, so I'm not trying to compare them. But for example, a deal that was considered to be nearly impossible in the States was what we called the North Atlantic Free Trade Association deal, which was very controversial, and they renegotiated that in a couple months, and that was Jared's office that did that. They also put forth a minor, not minor, but in comparison to this, a prison reform bill that was quite difficult at times, which took a lot of negotiations. Look, so I know the people that are doing it. I know they mean very well. And look, you have to realize that the Trump administration has been amazingly pro-Israel and has been very fair to Israel. They won't stop now, and I can say that with confidence. But I don't know what's in it, so I don't want to speak to that. But I'm very optimistic, of course, because I know the people within the White House. I know the position that they hold. So, yes.
I'm Denise from San Francisco.
Hello, another American. Yeah.
There we go. So two questions. First is how to confront and hopefully undermine BDS. Second question is, when you speak on campuses and you're confronted with very pro-Palestinian organizations, if you were to take the message that you probably have found here in Israel, that so much that BDS has destroyed in the West Bank has left Palestinians bereft of income, and they don't want that, how do you think they would respond?
So the question was about BDS, which all of you know, but it's Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions Movement, which is anti-Semitism, disguising as Zionism, which is disguising as a virtue signaling group for overly privileged Westerners that are looking for something to do with their spare time that only a market economy could give them. That's essentially what it is. It's these guys. It is people that are so miserable, the only meaning they could find is to try to find an injustice that doesn't exist, so they can march in the streets, so they can make an Instagram picture for their friends, say, look how good of a person I am. No, so that is the left, just so you know. Like, I'm a better person than you because I'm protesting apartheid. What apartheid? Well, Israel. What do you mean? They tell me it's apartheid, therefore it is. It's all lies. So the first thing is you have to realize where they're coming from there. I'm so much better informed now to be able to fight BDS on campus just from the last 48 hours. And I have Im Tirtzu to really thank for that. Seriously. I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing it. I prefaced it from the beginning. I apologize before I even started talking. So I will say that we fight BDS all the time in the States. All the time. Through trying to block resolutions. We just blocked another one. Sophia could tell you about it. And then I will do a thing called, we call it Campus Clash. It's kind of a metaphor, where I'll go speak on campus and we'll have thousands of students show up. And we just did one in Nottingham in the United Kingdom, where a pro-BDS, pro-Hamas, pro-Iranian guy comes up. And I was good enough to be able to cross-examine him, but I'm infinitely better now than I was even a week ago. A week ago I was in Nottingham, and he was talking about how Iran is this wonderful, beautiful country for all these people. I asked, how many homosexuals they have after they throw them off the top of buildings, because it's hard to count them when they're dead. So he didn't find that to be very funny. But and he thinks Iran is this great country and for human rights and all this stuff. It's unbelievable. And he thinks that Iran is being penalized by all these ridiculous, really, honestly, prejudiced tropes, is what he was saying, is the Zionist elite and all this sort of stuff. Horrible, horrible things that he was saying. And he says that nothing will get better until the BDS gets turned up even more. That's what he thinks. And he's trying to equate what was happening in South Africa to what's happening here, which is absolute and complete and total nonsense. And I asked him, did you know that there was an Arab serving on the Israeli Supreme Court? All these things that they don't know happens. But I will say that we must be very vigilant against BDS. And I like some of the measures that are being pushed back against here that I see. And there really should be we have to do what they do, which is name the names of the people financing this and the people that are doing this, because it's so hateful and it's so inappropriate. It really is. I mean, I said this earlier, but in the West, I laugh at these brats, and that's what I call them. And that's probably not. I mean, people say, "Oh, Charlie, you shouldn't name call," but is it name calling if it's true? So that's the question I always ask. But because they have life so good, you know the type. You're from San Francisco. They grew up in Beverly Hills. Their parents have all this, and then they end up going to UCLA and they march in the streets. These are Jewish kids marching for BDS at UCLA. It's like it just boggles your mind. Where do they learn this stuff? University is where. And I asked them. I said, "Do you want a BDS? Or boycott, divest, and sanction any other country besides Israel? Like any? No." Only Israel. Okay, fine. You don't want to boycott, divest, and sanction Iran or any China or North Korea or any of the actual human rights oppressors in the world. But there's a great book that Dennis Prager wrote, who's a total American hero, by the way. He's an amazing, amazing person. He really is. And I can't remember the title, but it's something around the lines of Why the Jews. Essentially, it makes the couple thousand year analysis of why Jews are always the victim of anti-Semitism for time and time and time again. And it was amazing going to the city of David yesterday, where they walked through the road to the temple that they discovered, and they discovered where the Jews hid, as Josephus described it, from the Romans trying to massacre them. I mean, this is thousands and thousands of years that we're talking about, that it repeats itself. And this is no different. And if it wasn't for Israel, if it wasn't for this state, Jews would be persecuted in every single pocket of the world. And it's the moral and righteous thing to continue to defend this country. And I look forward to continue to do it in the States with every piece of energy and platform that I have. So I think we have one or two more. They seem very excited. I don't want to leave any question totally unanswered. So, yes.
So Obama seemed to say that Israel was created because of the Holocaust. And it touches on what one of the guys said before, in that we should be emphasizing the indigeneity of the Jewish people to the land of Israel.
Yes.
The word Jew comes from Judah, Judea,
Totally.
right? That's where our very namesake comes from. So it's very, and Jesus, for example, or some of the greatest, Jewish people, like according to today's definitions, they would be called settlers. They would be called occupiers. Can you imagine this?
Well,
so this is the kind of thing to emphasize that the Jewish people are also indigenous
and
to
so
this land.
You just repeat the question. Obama would say that Israel was only created because of post-Holocaust. No, I agree with you. I'm just reciting it because this is important. Because if you read, everyone should read Ilhan Omar's op-ed in the Washington Post this morning. Because she says that. She says Israel was made in a rush. This is what she says. This is how she tries to modernize her anti-Semitism. Made in a rush. What do you do when you rush? You make mistakes, right? That's her way to cloak anti-Semitism, and no one called her out on that op-ed. I read it this morning. I couldn't believe it. I said, wait, hold on, Congresswoman. What do you do when you rush? You're trying to say Israel's a mistake, but you're trying to hide it, is what you're really trying to say. That's what Obama was trying to say. Made in a rush after the Holocaust to try to right the wrongs of the evil horror. That's essentially what she said. Okay. Well, first of all, Israel should exist for a variety of different reasons, and the indigenous people argument is awesome, and it works really, really well. I would expound even upon that, which is just ask the very basic question, is the world a better place because of Israel? All things being equal, and the answer is, of course it is. And if you say no, you have mountains of evidence that are to the contrary. So the medical advancements, the patents, the advancement of human rights, the refugee camps that Israel sets up for neighboring countries when they go to conflict. I went to the Golan Heights, and I was told that even during the Syrian civil war, the IDF set up, it's amazing to me that the IDF was setting up refugee camps for people that hate them. You think the Arabs would set up refugee camps if Israel is invaded by Greece? No, think about that. You think that Syria would set up a refugee camp for Jews if they were attacked by Europe? So I think that there's a moral argument to make as well, because the indigenous argument is dangerous in some way, because if Israel was indigenous but immoral, then it falls apart. So it needs to be kind of this three-legged stool, right? Because the indigenous argument falls apart if Israel was a horrible country. You're saying, but it's not. That's the good part. So you can combine the two together for an impenetrable argument, is what I'm saying. Is that not...
Combine the two, because sometimes there's not the emphasis on the left-wing campuses about indigeneity.
Right.
It's very important to the left.
And so when you bring that up, they believe that, for whatever reason, that this is Palestine. It's always been called Palestine, which comes from a Roman term, which is completely made up. It's not an indigenous people whatsoever. They're mostly Jordanian refugees, if that. And again, the broader question is, why can Muslims have 50-plus Muslim-majority countries, but the Jews can't have one? Jews are 14 million people worldwide. You can fact-check me on that, maybe 18, 15, somewhere around there. And yet there's 1 billion Muslims and 1 billion Christians. We Christians are dominant in most of the Western countries, but the Jews can't have one state that has almost all their holy sites. And the sad part is you can't even access all your holy sites, even in your holy land, because they want to take those away from you. And it really goes down to the hatred of the Jews. And that's really where you need to meet people, is at the basic. It's not anti-Zionism. I'm so sick and tired of hearing that. It is anti-Semitism. Because if it was Zionism and the Arabs were all of a sudden, in control, then people, that's fine, whatever. Zionism is the idea that Jewish people should have a home. But if you hate Jews altogether, then of course you're going to hate the idea that they have a home. And someone said something very interesting to me about the Golan Heights. They said, Assad will never be okay with giving up the Golan Heights to Israel. I said, why? They said they could never swallow losing territory to a Jew. I said, that's a very interesting thing to say. I thought that was a very interesting comment. And I'll allow you to agree or disagree with that in your own reflection of it. But I found it to be very interesting, because they could never live with themselves that somehow this would be, conquered land or whatever, in their crazy interpretation. So I think the moral argument with the indigenous argument makes it impenetrable. So I appreciate the comments. So we'll do 2 more. My friend John, yes.
Charlie, firstly I'd like to thank you very much on behalf of my wife and I for inviting us to Israel. This is our first time in Jerusalem, first time in Israel. Trtzu and to our friend here for taking us to Hebron yesterday. That was extraordinary. And what can I say? I mean, you're driving down a street and my wife says, well, why can't we go down that road? And Matal says, well, you'd be dead. And at that point, we suddenly realized that a lot of what we read in the press in England and in America has been basically what I call black propaganda or weaponized, really, media. And I think you guys here, my observation, I mean, my eyes have been opened, 180 degrees, really, and it's been the most extraordinary experience. But it's clear that the IDF, and on a military level, Israel, probably nobody better in the world than that. Your intelligence service is fantastic. But clearly, in the West, the ideas war is being lost, because there are ideas, like we had no clue as to what Hebron was actually like. And it's just been a complete eye-opener. So I've got two questions, really. Is A, do you feel that Charlie, that the black propaganda war, or the propaganda war, or the information war, let's just call it the information war, is actually being lost in America by Israel? And second question, what are the consequences of that in reality for Jerusalem and for Israel? And then what the hell do we do about it?
Great question. And so John is a dear friend, and it's a great example what happens when you can bring Westerners to Israel. Because I called up John on Thursday, sent him a text, said, why don't you join me? I'm here for a couple days, dear friend, and amazingly accepted my offer. And like you said, 180. And that's why you have to get more Americans and Brits and people to this country. You have to bring them here to see it for themselves. That can help fight the propaganda. I can tell you right now, you're losing in the American narrative war. You just are. And because I was even hypnotized by some of the lies. And I'm as pro-Israel as it gets in the Christian community in America. Seriously. I was here for the embassy move. And so that's something that needs to be really talked about even more. And I have some ideas what those solutions might be. Whether it be more media channels, more influencers, more people to see firsthand what's really going on here. And the consequences are severe, because if you have a generation in America that believes what Ilhan Omar believes and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez believes, that is, this is really Palestinian land, that Trump's a horrible president, that we should close down the embassy, that this is UN violation, then you got serious problems. If America turns its back on Israel, it will be a very, very sad day and very dangerous for this country, and we're not going to let that happen. So I know we're running out of time. I don't want to keep our hosts too stressed, but if you're interested in learning more, please check out Turning Point USA. Our website is tpusa.com. I see some good friends here. Adam Hoffman, it's great to see you again. And everybody, say, so many people came out for this. We're so deeply appreciative of it. And we're going to keep on fighting on campuses, mostly in America, but all around the world. Can't say enough great things about this amazing organization. I can't pronounce it yet, but I will. Im Tirtzu, right? Okay. And with the amazing picture of Herzl here. And God bless you all. We have your back. So thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. I will say it in English because I know there are a lot of English speakers here. Thank you for Eden, the owner of the place. And don't forget, no one bought a ticket to come here. It's because of Eden. So if you want to support this, the security costs a lot of money and stuff. So buy a drink. תודה רבה חבר'ה. תודה צ'רלי עוד פעם. God bless Turning Point USA.